Hi everybody, I'm Bonnie Barker at watch.bonniebigcrochet.com, and today I want to show you how to make the Doolin Delight sweater wrap. This is a stole, and it's also, or you could call it a shawl, with pockets, and it is trimmed with lovely pineapple trim on both ends of the stole. And this is the secret to these. On the back side is a sweater panel, which is really nice for the winter and keeping the back warm when you're wearing either this as a shawl or as a stole. Now, if you wanted to make this simply a stole, you are free to do that. Just omit the back sweater portion of this and you will have your pocket shawl ready to go. The pattern for this project is only available in my book, Contemporary Celtic Crochet. This is a 2014 publication, so many of you may already have the pattern on hand. The book is available on Amazon as well as in my Etsy store. The links are in the video description below. This is an intermediate project. I want to emphasize that, and I want to also emphasize that as you crochet through this project, to pay careful attention to the instructions that I'm going to be giving to crocheting some of these stitches, because a lot of times I use front post treble crochets when crossing cables. This particular design uses front post double crochets. That's not a typographical error in the book. That is accurate. So do be careful that you pay attention to that if you're already familiar with many of my stitches. If you're not, please check out the video description below, and I'll have some stitch videos listed so that you can practice these stitches before you get started. Okay, well, let's go ahead and begin. For this project, I'm recommending Barocco's Vintage DK yarn. Let me show you some information about this. This is 52% acrylic, 40% wool, 8% nylon. Each of these skeins has 290 yards or 266 meters, 3.5 ounces or 100 gram hanks. You are going to need 10 of these should you choose this particular type yarn. Now, originally, the yarn used for this project was a 100% acrylic yarn, and it is no longer available. It has been discontinued by the manufacturer. And quite honestly, I think the Barocco yarn here that I'm showing you is a vast improvement over the original yarn that I used. You can use any other DK weight yarn that you prefer. You're going to need approximately 2,640 yards of whichever DK weight yarn that you decide to use. You'll also need 2 crochet hooks. The gauge hook that I'll be using is an H or 8 or 5.00 millimeter. Now, if you need to switch to a different hook to get your gauge, feel free to do that. And I'm also going to need a size F or 5 or 3.75 millimeter, or a hook that is 2 sizes smaller than the gauge hook you end up using. Okay, I'm also recommending that you have a yarn needle and a pair of sharp scissors handy. One more thing, you're also going to need 3 1-inch buttons. Now we're ready to begin. We're going to start with the slip knot, and we are going to chain 60 chains. Now we're ready to start row 1, and to do that we are going to double crochet in the 4th chain, 1 2 3 4, 4th chain from the hook, and in each chain all the way across the row. At the end of this row you should have 58 double crochets, and in this particular pattern the chain 3 here at the very beginning does count as a double crochet in the written pattern. Now to begin row 2, we're going to chain 2, and I need to mention a couple of things before I begin this row, especially if you have done several of my designs already. First of all, we're going to be working the braided cable and the honeycomb using only front post double crochets. That's a little bit of a departure from the usual front post treble crochets. This is going to make for more of a compact type of fabric, which I think you're going to enjoy, especially if you're working with the thinner yarn. If you're substituting worsted weight yarn, this is going to be an issue. You probably need to look at working with either a number 3 or a number 2 yarn for this project because of this. Also for row 2, it says to skip the first 2 stitches, or it says to skip 2 stitches, and this is oftentimes because the first stitch is not usually worked in. I'm just going to go ahead and let you know that you really are going to be skipping the first 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, before we begin this braided cable. So skip the first 3 stitches. We're going to front post double crochet, not treble, double crochet in the next 2 stitches. Working in front of these last 2 stitches, we're going to front post double crochet in these 2 stitches. Again, we're not going to be working in this first border stitch of the row. Okay, this is going to be, like I said, going to make for a little bit more of a compact fabric. And then we front post double in the next 2 stitches. I'm so used to saying treble. I may slip up, but I'm going to be really focused here and trying to concentrate so that I don't mislead you in any way. Now we're going to work a half double crochet worked in through the top loops just the way you normally would. This is going to be acting as a spacer in between our cabling. Now the next 16 stitches, we're going to be working the foundation for the honeycomb stitch. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and again front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches. Working behind these 2 stitches, we're going to front post double crochet in the 2 stitches here that we skipped. Okay, so we come into this hole and we find that stitch. I am depending heavily upon the nerve endings in my tall man and in my thumbkin there in order to do this. And do this again. Come in to the back, to this window, this little hole here, and then I find the second stitch and I front post double crochet. It's a little bit trickier than the trebles, but it's very doable. If you need more instruction on these stitches that I'm working, please check in the video description below, and I will have them as separate video links should you need additional instruction. Skip the next 2 stitches, front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches. Working in front of these last 2 stitches, front post double crochet in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. Now this would be a really good time for me to pause. Let's take a look at what we've done here. Doesn't look like a lot, but let me say one thing. If I am going too quickly for you, I apologize, but I do have a solution for you. Down on this side of your screen, there'll be a little icon that looks like a gear. That'll be on this side for the left-handed version. If you click on that, it will bring up a playback speed, and then you can select the speed that will either slow down or speed up what I'm doing, and therefore hopefully help you. If you're watching from a cell phone, right up here, there'll be 3 vertical dots. It'll be over here for the left-handed version. If you click on that, it will do the same thing. You may have to stop the video in order to do this. Sometimes you don't have to. It depends on the system you're using, but I hope that serves you well and helps you to be able to learn at your rate of speed. Okay, skip the next 2 stitches here. We're still working on the honeycomb. We're going to work a front post double crochet in those next 2 stitches. And again, now working behind those front post doubles, we're going to come into the hole right here, and we're going to front post double crochet in each of those 2 stitches that we skipped. Like I said before, it's helpful for me to actually stick my thumb in there, and I'm holding on to that next stitch with my 2 fingers to know where to guide my hook. I know it seems like a special kind of calisthenics, but it's really not too difficult once you do this a couple times. Skip the next 2 stitches, front post double in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those last 2 stitches. We're going to front post double in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. Okay, so let's pause. So we have our 6 stitches here with the braided cable, half double crochet. We have our 8 and then 16 stitches. We have 2 sets of honeycomb going down then up. Now we're going to work a half double in that next stitch. Okay, now we're going to work a cable called the fishbone, which is kind of the opposite of the wheat stitch if you've ever worked my wheat stitch. Okay, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, front post double in the next 2 stitches. And this is where it varies from the wheat stitch. Instead of working behind these, we're going to work in front of these 2 stitches. It's kind of the reverse of what we've been doing with the foundation for the honeycomb. Okay, so we worked in front just like that. And you guessed it, the other side we're going to do the opposite. Skip 2 stitches. I wrapped my hook too many times. And we're going to work a front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches. And then working behind these 2 stitches, we're going to front post double crochet in those 2 stitches that we skipped, which is pretty much like what we've been doing with the honeycomb foundation. And let me go ahead and explain the difference in just a second. We're going to work a half double in that next stitch. Let me just explain what the difference is. Okay, for the foundation, for the honeycomb, the stitches are going to go down and up, down and then up. Okay, for the fishbone, every time you come to this with the front side facing, it's going to go up and then down, just continually through. When we work on this honeycomb, it's actually going to form a honeycomb shaped thing, and you'll see that in just a bit. So once we get through a few of these rows, it will be a very visual pattern, and I don't think you'll need to be, married to that written pattern quite as much. Okay, skip the next 2 stitches, front post double crochet in the next 2, and remember we're going to work behind these 2 stitches and front post double in those 2 stitches that we skipped. 1, and there we go, 2, skip the next 2, front post double in the next 2 stitches, and working in front of those last 2 stitches, front post double in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. Okay, so we have the first honeycomb goes down and then up, and we're going to do that one more time. Skip 2, front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches, and working behind those 2 stitches, we're going to front post double crochet in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. 1, and there we go, 2, skip 2 more, 1, 2, and let's go ahead and wrap our hook first. Front post double the next 2 stitches, and then working in front of those last 2 stitches, front post double crochet in the 2 stitches that we skipped. All right, so now we have the down up and the down up with the honeycomb. Okay, now we're going to work a half double crochet in the next stitch, and we should have 6 stitches left so that we can work that braided cable. Skip the next 2, front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches, working in front of these 2 stitches, front post double in the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and the last 2 stitches we're going to front post double crochet in those last 2 stitches. So we get to the last, it's really a turning chain or a starting chain, but it also counts as a stitch. We're going to work a half double crochet in that stitch just like that, and there you have it. And let me also just state, to be clear, that the chain 2 at the beginning does count as a half double crochet in the stitch count of the pattern. Okay, so now we're on to row 3. We're going to turn, chain 2, and now this is the back side facing. and we're going to skip the first 2 stitches. Actually, the first 3, we're not going to, again, this is not counting as a stitch, but we skip these 2 stitches, 1, 2 of the braided cable, and we're going to back post a double crochet in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those stitches as seen from the front side. Let's go ahead and flip it up. We're going to work a back post here and then here. Again, this is something that with practice your fingers will learn to help you with. They will learn to feel which is the next stitch, and that will be very helpful. And then now the next 2 stitches, which are kind of hidden back here, we're going to do back post around those 2. So for the braided cable, make sure that you are working over 6 stitches. So after finishing that braided cable, we're going to work a half double crochet in that next stitch. It's in the top of the half double crochet from the last row. And now we're going to work just back post double crochets over the next 16 stitches. We're not crossing anything. We're just going to work them straight across as they appear. And I'll just work this row with you just for clarity, and so there's no doubt as to what we're working with. And I will say that do be careful to know where you're working here, because until these stitches are defined, it's not as easy to see where the front is and where the back is until you get some more rows there so that you can see the pattern more clearly. So that's 8. Let's do 8 more. This is working over the second honeycomb. Okay, and got 4 more. I'll show this to you in just a second as soon as I finish these next, if I can get that next stitch. There we go. With this tighter crocheted fabric, it can be a little bit trickier, but I think you're going to like the result. Okay, and let's go and put a half double crochet in that next half double. I just want to turn and show you what we just worked over. We just worked back post double crochets over those 16 stitches, which is going to be forming a honeycomb, and you'll see that when we finish the next row or 2. Okay, now we're going to be working over the back side of that fishbone, which is just going to be 8 more back post double crochets. 2 and 3 and 4. This might be a good place to speed up here. 5, 6, 7, and the last one, 8. Nice even numbers. And then a half double crochet, again, that separator, that's going to separate the different cables. And then now we do 16 more back post double crochets. I'm going to go ahead, I'll go ahead and work this with you just so that you can see where they are. These are just all back post double crochets across the other side where the honeycomb are going to be formed. And let's try that one again. Sometimes, there we go. Sometimes other strands get in the way. We want to make sure we start off correctly. And I'm going to have 8 more stitches here. So if I can keep the yarn from getting tangled, okay. And let's see. Okay, and we just got 4 more to go. and 2 more. Okay. Now we should have another half double. If it might be helpful to even count as you go across that to make sure that you get all 16 for those honeycomb stitches. Now this is where you need to be careful to skip 2. This is working up with the back side of the braided cable. You will be skipping the first 2 stitches, 1, 2, and just like we did with the braided cable on the other side, back post double crochets those next 2 stitches. Working in front of those stitches as seen from the front side. I'm going to flip it up there so that you can see. And we're going to work this stitch first. Well, let's try that again. Wrap the hook. That works much better for a back post double crochet, and then the next stitch. And then we do the very next 2 stitches, which are right here. A little bit hidden way there, but they are next. You can see them on top, but again, use those nerve endings and your tall man and your thumbkin so that you can find those stitches. All right, now at the end of this row we're going to work a half double crochet. Doesn't look like much from this side, probably doesn't look like much from the front side either, but you can see more definition, and as we do another few rows you will be able to see the pattern evolve. All right, so now for row number 4, we're going to chain 2. And again, we're not working in this first stitch. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches. And we're going to front post double crochet in those next 2 stitches. This is over the braid again. And it's interesting, the braided cable, you do the same thing each time. With the front side facing, you do front post double crochets. With the back side facing, you do the same thing, but with back post double crochets. And then we work the 2 stitches that we just skipped. And then we do the next 2 stitches, which you can see the tops of them here. We're going to have to use our fingers to actually find them. There they are. Especially using the double crochets and the front post double crochets. Okay, half double in this next stitch. Now this is where the honeycomb gets its shape. We're gonna, oops, just a double crochet now. Skip these 2 stitches, front post double crochets in the next 2. Now working in front of these 2 stitches, we're going to front post double the 2 stitches that we skipped. Skip the next 2 stitches, front post double those next 2 stitches. Now working behind these 2 stitches, we're going to come into the hole right here, and we're going to front post treble in the 2 stitches that we skipped. And it does get easier doing these as we add rows, as you can see. Okay, and we're going to do this again. Skip the next 2 stitches, front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches. Working in front of those last 2 stitches, we're going to front post double in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. And then again, skip the next 2, front post double crochet in the 2 stitches. Now coming in behind those last 2 stitches, we're going to come in and we're going to front post double crochet in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. There it is. And then a half double crochet and a half double crochet. Let's pause again. And I keep saying this is going to look better as we keep going, but you can kind of see the shape now. Once we add the next row, it's going to help shape that up a little bit more. Okay, so now we work the fishbone, and we do it the same way we did as on row 2. Skip 2, front post double crochet in those next 2. Working in front of those last 2 stitches, we're going to front post double crochet in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. Okay, go to the other side, skip 2, front post double crochet in those next 2 stitches, and working behind those last 2 stitches, we're going to front post double crochet in those 2 skipped stitches. Now I realize that what I'm doing is a lot of repeating things that are similar but in different places and in different ways, and so for that reason it's one of those patterns you really have to pay attention. Okay, half double crochet. Okay, so let's go ahead and pause here. So we have the 6 stitches again of the braided cable. Then we have formed really 2 nice honeycombs here over these 16 stitches, half double crochet. And then here we have the fishbone, which is essentially the opposite of the wheat stitch. But we go ahead and we have the over the 8 stitches, half double. And this is a symmetrical pattern, so we're going to now have 2 more honeycombs on this side, half double, and then the braided cable. I'm going to go ahead and finish working these with you because these are the rows that we're going to be repeating a lot. Okay, so I front post double crochets in those stitches, working in front of those 2 stitches. I'm going to front post double crochet in the 2 stitches that were skipped, skip the next 2, front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches. Now working behind, make sure I have enough yarn supply here. Working behind these 2 stitches, we're going to front post treble in the 2 stitches that we skipped. Let's go ahead and bring those up for you. There's the first one. Again, I know I'm repeating myself. That's the job of a teacher, is to say things again and again, but I am depending heavily upon the nerve endings in my fingers there, finger and thumb. Skip the next 2 stitches, front post double in those next 2 stitches, working in front of those last 2 stitches, front post double in the 2 stitches that I skipped, skip the next 2. You're probably going to be hearing that in your sleep tonight. I'm sorry. Front post double crochet in those next 2, working behind those 2 stitches. We're going to front post double in the 2 stitches that we skipped. 1 and 2. Half double in that half double crochet. And that brings us to the braided cable. We skip 2, front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those last 2 stitches. We're going to front post double crochet in the 2 skipped stitches, and then front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches, which are right here, hiding behind the first 2 that we worked on for the braided cable. And then a half double crochet. Okay, this is what we have after completing row number 4. I know it looks a little rustic at this point, but it will be better defined as we crochet more rows. Now for row number 5, we're going to chain 2, and we're going to work the braided cables just the way we've been working them, with the back side facing. Skip 2 stitches, and then we're going to back post double in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those 2 stitches as seen from the front side. We're going to back post in these 2 stitches, 1, 2, and then back post double crochet in the next 2 stitches, which are hidden back here. These are before you get to that half double crochet. Half double in the top loops of the half double crochet. There we go. And then now for the next 16 stitches, we're just going to back post double crochet straight across. So I'm going to go ahead and do those 16 stitches off camera, but go ahead and work those. After working those 16 stitches across the wheat cable. Let me show you what it looks like from the other side. Okay, we're going to work a half double crochet in the next half double crochet. Now we're going to work back post double crochets across the next 8 stitches, and this is the back side of the fishbone stitch. So I'll go ahead and work those 8 stitches. After those 8 back post double crochets, I'm going to work another half double, work through the top loops, and then we have another 16 back post double crochets worked over the honeycomb section. So go ahead and work those 16 stitches. After working those 16 stitches across the honeycomb half double, worked into half top loops of the half double of the previous row. Now the braided cable, skip 2 stitches, and these stitches are the next 2 over here. Back post double, and those next 2 stitches, they are kind of a bit on the other side, but they are the very next 2. They're kind of way over here. And then we work in front of those as seen from the front side over these 2 stitches that we just skipped. All right, let's try that one again. There we go. 1, 2, and then the last 2 stitches, which are way back here. You may have to dig to find these 2. All right, and then a half double in that last stitch, and this is the back side, which doesn't look like much. And now the front side, you can see how the honeycombs are much more formed, and we see the pattern evolving with the fishbone, and again those honeycombs, and we have the braids. All right, now I'm going to give you a sizable assignment. For rows 6 through 45, we're going to repeat rows 2, which is the row that began the the crossing here, the beginning of the honeycombs and everything. Rows 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to repeat that 10 times more until vertically you're going to have a total of 11 honeycombs stacked. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So go ahead and complete those rows. This is what you should have after having completed through row 45. And hopefully you can see the nice texture here is much more defined, and you see the fishbone down the center, which is again, it's just a 2-row repeat over and over again. And of course this is more of a 4-row repeat, and then you have the 2-row repeat of the braided cable. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to row 46, and this is where we are going to change only the honeycomb here and here. These sections are going to change to the Celtic weave, and just to emphasize again, we are using front post double crochets with this Celtic weave, not the usual front post treble crochets, and I'll demonstrate that for you in just a second. But the braided cable, the center fishbone, and the braided cable over here will remain constant. Okay, so that's not going to change. This is all going to be worked the same way. It's just these sections where you have the honeycomb. Again, I'm repeating myself, but again, it's going to be changing to the Celtic weave. Let's go ahead and get started with this. We're going to start with a chain 2. And just like we've been doing, skip the next 2 stitches. And we're going to front post double crochet in those next 2 stitches. Working in front of those 2 stitches, we're going to front post double crochet in those 2 stitches that were skipped. I'm just being very specific the first time through, and then of course once we finish this row and the next, you're going to have a nice assignment. All right, and the next 2 stitches, which are down here, go ahead and front post double crochet over those to complete our braided cable, and then half double, and that next half double crochet. Okay, now this is where everything changes up a little bit. Okay, so we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and we're going to front post double in the next 2, and then we're going to work in front of those 2 stitches and front post double in the next 2 stitches, and this is the repeat over these 16 stitches. Skip the next 2, front post double crochet in the next 2, working in front. We're not going to be having to work behind the stitches, at least on this row for the Celtic weave, so that hopefully will be a little bit of a nice change for you. Skip these 2, front post double crochet in the next 2, and then working in front post double crochet in those next 2 stitches. Skip 2, front post double crochet in those next 2 stitches, working in front of those stitches, front post double crochet in those 2 skip stitches. Let's pause. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of those four stitch, what I'd like to call crosses, because you're crossing in front. And then we come to the half double, do that half double, and then we're going to work our fishbone again, just the same way we've been working it. But I'm going to work it, I know you could probably do it, but just so it's not confusing with where to cross behind or in front, I'm going to do it with you. Skip 2, and front post double, those next 2 working in front. So it's really amazing to me just how many different combinations of cables you can get by using these front crosses and back crosses. Okay, skip the next 2, and front post double in those next 2 stitches. Now this is where with the fishbone you're going to work behind those 2 stitches. And then front post, correct that, half double crochet in the half double, and then now we return to the Celtic weave. Now I'll tell you, a common error at this point is to just continue to do the honeycomb. I've actually done that while practicing the stitch, so make sure that we switch over to the Celtic weave for all 16 stitches. Skip 2, front post double in the next 2, and then just work in front. Every time we do these crosses, you're working in front, we're not working behind this over these next 16 stitches. Skip 2, front post double, the next 2, working in front of those last 2, front post double. Okay, do that again. Skip 2, front post double crochet in the next 2, working in front of those 2 stitches, front post double in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. And let's do this again. Skip 2, front post double in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those last 2 stitches, front post double in the 2 stitches that we just skipped, and half double in that half double crochet. Make sure we come through all the loops. There we go. Skip 2, this is the braided cable now. This is the 6 stitch cable, so skip 2, front post double in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those last 2 stitches, front post double in the 2 stitches that we skipped, and then the last 2 stitches, which are oftentimes hiding in the back here, front post double. Don't forget those last 2 stitches. If you do, you will be greatly off your stitch count, and that stitch, these cables, going to look strange. Okay, so half double at the end. So this is what row 46 will look like when you complete this. Now let's turn to work row 47. Again, you can see where I connected my yarn there. Chain 2, and we're going to, again, working the back side of the braid. Nothing has changed with this. Skip 2, back post double crochet in those next 2 stitches, working in front of these last 2 stitches as seen from the front side. I'll go ahead and turn this up so that you can see that I'm grabbing the stitch here and completing that. It's 1 and 2, and then don't forget these last 2, back post double in the next 2 stitches. These are the 2, again, they like to hide. Half double in that next stitch. Okay, now we are going to back post double in the first 2 stitches. This is probably a little more challenging. Okay, back post double in these 2 stitches. Skip the next 2 stitches, back post double in the next 2 stitches. And working in front of these last 2 stitches as seen from the front side, we are going to again use the nerve endings in our tall man and thumbkin here, and these are the 2 stitches that we're going to work, but we're going to come around the back. I'm going to show you the hook coming in through the back, and we're going to work a back post double around that stitch and the next stitch, which is right here. I hope you can see that. This is a little challenging. I just can't emphasize that enough. So give yourself some time. If you've never worked the Celtic weave stitch, I highly recommend that you perhaps try it on a separate swatch so that it's not as confusing. And I will put a video link in the video description so that you can look at another video that's exclusively on the Celtic weave. Okay, so we're going to do this again. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, which are these 2, which are going to be leaning in this direction. And we're going to actually pick up the stitches going in this direction on the back side, these 2. And it does feel like a long reach across there. Okay. Now working in front of these 2, as seen from the front side, I'm going to reach my hook around. I'm going to come around through the back side. Let me get these 2 stitches here are what I'm coming after. And do the 1 back post double crochet and the next one. And we have 1 more to do. Skip the next 2, back post double crochet in those next 2 stitches. There we go. And again, working in front of these as seen from the front side. I'm going to come around, bring the hook from all the way in the back for that next stitch. Again, please use that. If I'm going too fast for you, slow down the video. Maybe even hit pause if that's helpful. Okay, so now we have only 2 stitches left in this series. Remember, let me go ahead and turn this around. We started with 2 back post double crochets without skipping anything. Well, we have those 2 left over right here. Let me show you right here. So now we're going to work back post double crochets over these 2 stitches. Okay, and that completes the Celtic weave section. We come to the half double. We work a half double in that space, and then now we have just 8 back post double crochets straight across that center fishbone cable. And that's 3, 4, 5, 1 more, 6, and then 2 more, 7, and then 8. Half double in that next half double, and now we're going to do the Celtic weave again, backside facing, and again we start out with 2 back post double crochets, 1, 2. Now we're going to skip 2, 1, 2, and then we get these next 2 over here, back post double crochets. Now working in front of these, as seen from the front side. Let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and work back post double crochets in those 2 stitches that we skipped. And we're going to do that across. Skip the next 2, which again are leaning this direction, and we're going to pick up the 2 stitches leaning this direction. 1, 2, and then working in front of these as seen from the front side, pick up those 2 stitches that we skipped. Let's try that one. There we go. And do this one more time. Skip the next 2. There you go, back post double crochet in those next 2 stitches, working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side. So we're going to come around the back like this. Okay, and then we have 2 stitches remaining. So let me show you. We cross these stitches with the back side facing us 1, 2, 3 times. Okay, so we have 3 crosses, and then just hold it back there for you. 3 crossings of the cables here, and then we started off with 2 back post double, and we're going to end with 2 back post double. Again, this is only with the back side facing us, so go ahead and get those. Then we end in the usual way with that half double crochet, and we're back to the braided cable again. Skip 2, back post double in the next 2, working in front of those as seen from the front side. Of course, these are easier because you're not digging them out of other stitches that are layered like we had with the Celtic weave. And then you have your 2 stitches here that remain with that braided cable, 2 back post doubles, and then a half double crochet. Okay, so let's turn around and see what we have. And I know it doesn't look like much just yet, but as soon as we get additional rows going, it's going to look quite nice. So let me go ahead and give you an assignment. So now we're going to work rows 48 through 78, and it's going to be repeating rows 46 and 47. That's these rows with the Celtic weave in the, on these sections. We're going to repeat those 15 times. So I'm going to go ahead and start row 48, but we are going to just repeat again rows 47, 46 and 47, but I just wanted to go ahead and I'm going to work this braided cable, and then I'm going to show you what it would look like working over the Celtic weave again for a repeat of row 46. So I just wanted to show you what this is going to look like with these rows that you're going to be working. You're going to skip 2 and front post double crochet in the next 2, working in front of those stitches, front post double crochet in the stitches that you skipped. I think you're going to find this row much easier. Skip the next 2. Now also notice that these stitches are hiding behind here a little bit. Skip these 2, front post double in the next 2 stitches, and working in front of these 2 stitches, we're going to front post double in these 2 stitches that we skipped. Now they're a little bit hidden and it's a little bit tight in there, but don't forget those stitches. These are very important. Okay, you're going to have 16 of these across the Celtic weave section. Skip the next 2 stitches here, front post double in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those last 2 stitches. We're going to front post double in these 2 stitches here. They're a little bit hidden. Okay, so go ahead and work those. And then the second one. And then one more time, skip these 2 stitches, front post double in the next 2 stitches. There we go. Make sure you find those. Again, using the nerve endings in these two fingers, or your finger and your thumb there. Okay, I just wanted to see you or show you how this will start to become interwoven. All right, we'll go ahead and finish through row 78. I have finished through row 78, and let me go ahead and show you what I have so far. It's coming out lovely with this yarn. Let me show you also this. Do you see how this is curling a little bit? This is pretty normal with this stitch, and we're going to work another row, row 79, which is going to take that curl out and prepare us to work this section again. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn. This is with the back side facing, and we are going to repeat row number 3, and I'll go ahead and talk you through this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and work the braided cable section and the half double crochet, and then I'll show you what to do over the next section. So go ahead and work to this point. So after working that, those 3 back post double crochets over the braided cable, we come to the back side of the Celtic weave, and what we need to do is discontinue the Celtic weave so that we can begin working the other stitch, the honeycomb, and we're simply going to work back post double crochets across those 16 stitches. So just work back post. I'm just going to work a few of these with you. Okay, so we're just working back post double crochets all the way across these 16 stitches, and then we're just maintaining pattern stitch, which would be half double crochet, 8 more back post double crochets over the fishbone, half double, and then again 16 back post double crochets here, half double, and then we work those 6 stitches over the braided cable, which again skip 2 back post double crochet here, and then working in front, as seen from the back. You know the routine by now. Back post double crochet in these 2 stitches, and then in the last 2, and then a half double crochet in that last, in the turning chain. Okay, so where do we go from here? This is where we're going to do some repeats. I'm going to give a large assignment since you've already done basically what we're going to do for the stole portion. So we're going to work another set of stitches. I'll give you the numbers in just a second. We're going to work the honeycomb section again, just like it is. And then we're going to work another Celtic weave section, same number of rows. And then we're going to end by working another section, or the third section, with the honeycomb. So now if you're looking at the book with me where the pattern is written, there is a misprint. It says row 80, and the instructions, which are correct, says repeat rows 2 through 79. So rows 2 through 79 would be the honeycomb section, and then the Celtic weave section, all of that one more time. And instead of just being a 1 row repeat, obviously that's more than 1 row, this should have said rows 80 through 157. After that, below that, where it says rows 81 through 158, that should actually be rows 158 through 201, which is essentially repeating just this honeycomb section one more time. So if you just wanted to pencil that in, just for the record, the directions after those row numbers, those are correct. Okay. Now after completing all of the rows of the stole, my stole is the stole portion is approximately 69 inches long. Again, these are all approximates, and about 10.5 inches wide. Okay, so now we are going to work a perimeter round all the way around the stole. And before we do that, we need to make sure that we change to our smaller hook. I'll be using a size F or size 5, which is a 3.75 millimeter crochet hook. It's very important that you pay attention to the millimeter, because depending on what country you are viewing this from, sometimes the letters have different millimeters. So I'm using a 3.75 millimeter crochet hook for this round. So after having changed to the smaller crochet hook, we are going to chain 1, and this is the edging section. We are going to work a single crochet in each stitch all the way across, just working in through the top loops. Okay, so we're just going to work that straight across all the way. And when I get to that corner, I will show you what to do next. After having worked those single crochets evenly across, now we're going to chain 2 and turn 90 degrees to work along the row ends. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to work 3 single crochets for every 2 row ends. So one way you can do this is single crochet in that first row end, which is the chain, and then 2 in the next row end. And then you can alternate that all the way across. 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochets in the next row end. And again, just be sure that you are using your smaller crochet hook for this, because if you're not, it's going to be pretty wavy after doing this row. And when you get to the end, or to the corner rather, you should have approximately 303 single crochets along these row ends. So go ahead and work that, again alternating 1 single crochet in one row end and then 2 in the next. After having worked those single crochets all the way across those row ends, we're going to turn 90 degrees again, chain 2, 1, 2, and we are going to single crochet in each stitch across the foundation chain. Okay, and what I'd like to do, try to bring it there so you can see, is I like to work on what it remains of the chain. And if you're not sure where to put your hook, find out where that last or the stitch was and put it in the same place. And you see those 2 strands, I'm just going to single crochet right over them, and it's very easy to find. This is another reason why I'm not a real big fan of working in the back bump of the chain, because if I'm going to work a perimeter round, the chain is not going to be visible at any rate. So no matter how you work it, it's going to be completely covered, at least in this particular design. So I just want to make sure you can see where I'm putting the hook. You should have 1 single crochet for each stitch across this side. And let me go ahead and jump ahead. You're going to go all the way to the last stitch here, and then chain 2 and turn, and then again you're going to work across the row ends, making sure that you work 3 stitches for every 2 row ends. So just like we alternated 2 then 1, 2 then 1 on the row ends, you can pretty much do the same, 2 single crochets in this row end and then 1 in the next, 2 and 1, until you have approximately 303 stitches across that end. And I'll go ahead and work that, and then I'll show you the connecting point. So this is what you should have after working those single crochets all the way around the perimeter. We're not going to join because we are not going to continue working around, but we're going to merely work on just one side. This is going to be the long side with the approximately 302 stitches along that side. Okay, we're going to go ahead and chain 2, turn, and we're going to work front and back post double crochets. We're going to skip the first stitch, and then we're going to work a front post double crochet followed by a back post double crochet. And yes, you can work post stitches in single crochets. Okay, and make sure that you work it around the stitch just like you would any other stitch. So go ahead and work this all the way across until you get to the next corner, and then I'll show you how to turn at that point. After working those front post and back post stitches all the way across, I do end by working a front post double crochet. Of course, if you ended up with a back post double crochet with so many stitches, it really isn't going to be a deal breaker here. And the last stitch I'm going to work is a half double crochet at the end of this row. Now we're going to turn. We're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and what we're going to do here is we're going to work back post double crochets over back post, and front post double crochets over front post. Now, if you ended up starting with a front post instead of a back post, don't worry about that. Just make sure that your front posts are over the front post and the back post are over the back post. One stitch and a stitch count of 303 stitches, I promise you, is not going to make any difference whatsoever. Okay, so let's just go ahead and we work these front post and back post all the way across. And when we get row 2 ends with a back post double crochet and then working a half double in the turning chain. Okay, so now before we begin row number 3, what we need to do is you need to decide where you want the buttons for this project to go, because the next row is going to include making buttonholes. So what I've done is I went ahead and put this on and decided where I wanted these buttons to come. And I designated the spaces here. Okay, let me go ahead and give you the stitch counts just in case you want those. So on the right side, I actually put my very first stitch marker at the 48th stitch, and then 16 stitches further up I put another one here, and 16 stitches further up I put the other one right here. Now, depending on how you want this to fit you, you may want the sizing to be different. You may want the buttons to be lower, you may want them to be higher. This is really all up to you, but this is just the way I am marking off the buttonholes right now. Now, when we begin crocheting, we're actually starting on the left side. Now for the beginning of row 3, we start the same way. We chain 2, and we are going to start with a front post over all the front post double crochets, and then we're going to back post over the back post double crochets all the way until you get to the first marker for the buttonhole, and then I'll show you what to do. And I've worked my way all the way to the first stitch marker, so I'm going to go ahead and take that stitch marker out, remove it, and I'm going to just chain 1. I'm going to skip this stitch entirely and then work the next stitch. Okay, so we're leaving just a chain 1 here, and when we come back the next row, I'll give a little demonstration, but when we come back, you're just going to work in this space. So we're going to work the next 15 or 16 stitches. Let's get a good start to this. I'll go ahead and work these stitches. So after working the stitches in between, and what you actually can do, I probably will recommend that you do this, go ahead and mark the chain 1 space, which is right here. Go ahead and put that stitch marker back in that place just so that you don't skip it on the next row. Okay, so I'm going to take this stitch marker out. I'm going to skip this stitch, and then make sure I put a chain 1 in between. There we go. Okay, so I've worked a front post double crochet. I'm going to skip this stitch, and then I worked the next stitch, which was another front post double crochet, and I'm going to go ahead and just slip that stitch marker right in that space. Now, if you don't have stitch markers, you can just use a piece of contrasting yarn to mark your space. It's mostly just a visual so that you know where to put these buttonholes in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish these stitches until I get to the next buttonhole, and I'll do this one for you as well. So I've come to the third buttonhole, and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to remove the stitch marker, chain 1, skip the stitch, and then work the next stitch. And so I'm going to work these all the way to the end, but let me go ahead and mark this spot so that I don't forget that. And we're going to work these stitches all the way until we get to the end, and then we're going to again work a half double crochet in that chain 2 space. But now we're ready to begin row 4 of the ribbing, and we start again with a chain 2, and then depending on how your row ended, you can either start with a front post or back post double crochet, as long as you're working back post over back post and then front post over front post double crochets alternating. So go ahead and work this until you get to the first stitch marker for the buttonhole. So to complete the buttonhole, I've worked in front post and back post double crochets until the stitch marker. Let's go ahead and get rid of the stitch marker. In this space, we're just going to work a half double crochet just like this, and then we continue on back post over back post, front post over the front post, etc., until we get to the next buttonhole, and then we'll do the same thing. And again, after working our way front and back post double crochet till we get to the next stitch marker, go ahead and take that out, half double crochet in that chain 1 space, and then we continue working in pattern stitch with the back post and front post double crochets. So we're going to work this all the way even to the 3rd buttonhole, do the same thing, and then we're going to go all the way to the end, and then we're going to do the half double crochet in the chain 2 turning chain, turn, and for row number 5 we're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to work all the way across with front post and back post. When you get to the half double crochet, just treat that as a post stitch, and whatever you need to do, whether a front post or a back post, just go ahead and work that accordingly. And then we're going to fasten off at the end of row 5. At the end of row 5, we just give it a chain and a tug, and we're going to fasten off because we're done with the ribbing on this side of the stole.